Yes, you can start.
Say hi everyone, I'm Jasmine. I'm a first year student at University of Pennsylvania. And so let me tell you a little bit about myself. Okay, so can you guys all see my screen? That's a yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that first picture is a picture from quite a bit ago, but it's in the same room as I am now. So that was my childhood dog. His name was Munchie. And then the one in the middle was also my childhood dog. Her name was Zoe. And the one all the way on the left, right now is my current dog, and his name's Muffin. So I'm Muffin's mom, I guess. I majored in biochemistry at Hunter, and I did a minor in psychology. And so the reason why I chose a career in veterinary medicine is really for the dog that's in all the way on the left-hand side. So Munchie was diagnosed with lymphoma when I was in college. Had him ever since I was like 9 years old. And so that was I always knew I wanted to work with animals in some way, shape, or form. But once he got sick and I did get that diagnosis, I decided that it was time to really get serious about what I wanted to do in life. Um, and that was I want to eventually study cancer, specifically in dogs. And so that's how I really got it started. I started working in emergency medicine just to really see the presentation of cases on a very diverse scale and to see it sort of present in the most advanced form of illness there is. And so from there, I really just solidified I want to work with animals. I loved science, and veterinary medicine was just sort of where both of those things really made sense together. And I really enjoyed it. I worked at a bunch of places, but the most impactful one that I worked at was Veterinary Emergency and Referral Group in Park Slope. And I'll get into that a little more later, but I definitely recommend working in an environment sort of like that one because it had so many specialties and I really got to explore really quickly if this was the path I wanted to take, and if I wanted to take this path, which specialty I would want to go into. So that was really helpful. And so ultimately, that's my answer to the last question. I want to pursue either emergency medicine, more on the critical care level, or I want to do oncology. But either way, I don't plan on doing private practice or general practice. I want to work in a hospital setting in a specialty field. So some vet school application details. I applied in my junior year, so I didn't do a gap year, and I applied pretty broadly in terms of location. I did apply to every school possible on the East Coast, which is only four or three. It was Cornell, UPenn, Tufts, and Long Island University. So those were the four that I applied to that are on the East Coast. I applied internationally as well to the Royal Veterinary College. And then sort more sparse things that I applied to Michigan State University, University of Wisconsin, and Colorado State University. And you can see what the results of each one was. I did interview with Royal Veterinary College, which they have a little bit of a different interview process than the other schools. And I can get into that a little bit if anyone is interested in the Royal Veterinary College. Um, that was the first interview that I did have, and I was definitely really nervous. I knew I didn't perform well in that interview, and I did end up getting waitlisted. Cornell University, they don't do an interview process, so that was just an outright rejection. I interviewed with University of Pennsylvania and I got in. Michigan State University offered me to uh, do an interview, but by that time I had already gotten into other schools that I would have attended over Michigan State. So I told them that I would be declining my interview and to just give it to the next person who they would be interested in. I interviewed with Tufts and I did get in there. And same thing with Long Island University. I did an interview and I did get in. And then two other schools that didn't do interviews were University of Wisconsin and Colorado State University. And I, again, did not get in there. But when choosing sort of where to apply to, I definitely didn't do as cohesive research as I should have done. I didn't look into specifically the in-state versus out-of-state acceptances per school. And so I didn't realize how important it was when I was applying to schools like, I don't know which one it is for sure, but I want to say Michigan State likes to take more in-state applicants than out-of-state applicants. And so it it really didn't make, I wouldn't say it made too much of a difference, but it definitely made me more nervous within the application cycle, knowing that there was a lower chance of me getting a spot there because simply because I was out of state. Um, so I ended up the three of the schools that I ended up choosing between were University of Pennsylvania, Tufts University, and Long Island University. And so I did choose amongst University of Pennsylvania and Tufts University, I chose Pennsylvania because it's closer to New York. New York is where my family is. New York is where I grew up, and my significant other still lives in New York. So I did choose based on location there. And when it came to like the financial breakdown and cost of how much it would be to attend each school, I ended up being a recruitment for the University of Pennsylvania. So they offered me a little bit of a scholarship for each year, bringing their cost of tuition to a lower standpoint than Tufts. And I didn't really consider going to Long Island University after I got into more established universities. Long Island University, when I was applying, had not graduated, and still they have not graduated their inaugural class, which is they opened about, I think, 4 years ago, so they haven't graduated their first class yet. They are accredited provisionally, meaning that if you do go to that school, you will be able to graduate with the DBM, like no matter what happens to the program, you're pretty much secure in that. But they have no plans of building a teaching hospital, from what I know. And while it is good to have, like they have a lot of partnerships across New York and in other places, and they send students to Nebraska so that they could get the hands-on experience that they need. I felt that it was really important to me that there was a teaching hospital on campus where I could learn and where it would be much more standardized across students. The experience that every single person got would be more alike rather than if you were being, I guess, shown or like brought to other practices. So for that reason, I did not choose Long Island University. Additionally, because they are just so new, I know that they're doing everything that they can to make sure that everyone gets their NAVLE scores that they need to become to get their licensure. But because there was no established published scores yet, but they will be publishing them soon because their first class just took it, so it'd be more of an option. I was just too concerned about that to truly consider them after I got into more established universities. And I ultimately want to do research. I'm going to be doing some research this summer with an immunologist to target, oops, oops, okay, to target cancer. And so there were more opportunities at Penn simply because um, Tufts University does have like a medical school and a vet school, but the vet school is quite a ways away from the medical school. Whereas at Penn, the medical school is about like a 10-minute walk away. And so if I wanted to join, like work in a lab setting, I had to be much more convenient for me in all areas. And then for college activities, I only included the ones that I had for college. I definitely did have more experiences from high school, but just from college, I had 20 hours from Gallup, New York City, which is, I'm sure the pre-vet club talks about it because that's how I found out about it. Um, but it's you help riders therapeutic riding. You do some sidewalking, you can do some barn cleaning. I mostly did barn work because I don't have the physical strength to catch someone if they were too about to fall off a horse. So I did barn work mostly. I did 20 hours of that. I volunteered at Animal Haven shelter for 32 hours. And for Animal Haven, their shifts are about 2 hours. And it was pretty hard for me to sign up for more than that. Like block wise, I couldn't do 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. So I did just have 32 hours from there. I was a receptionist for 136 hours. And I do recommend doing something like that. I know it's not as hands-on as if you were a kennel assistant or a veterinary assistant, but being a receptionist lets you talk to clients, sometimes even more than if you were a veterinary assistant. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And so you can really talk about that in your application as well, that you understand that veterinary medicine is just not just about the animals, but also really about the owners. And so it's good to have a reflection of that in your application, that you do know what it means to converse with owners. I was a private academic tutor for a boy with autism, so I did talk about that in my application as well. I did a vaccine clinic, but it was just one day, so I just had 6 hours. Most of my experience comes from veterinary emergency and referral group at 1,170 hours at the time of application. But there are schools that, although they say like, I know on the application they say like, do not write anything that you haven't done yet, only the hours that you have already. There will be schools that will reach out to you in the middle of the application cycle and be like, hey, like, what have you done since? And so definitely don't stop working once you've hit submit on your application because schools will want to know that you've continued. I think it was Tufts or maybe UPenn where they asked me to write what I have done since I've applied, and Wisconsin as well. So I definitely ended up with more hours than that, but that was at the time of application. I was also an intern at Brooklyn Heights Veterinary Hospital, and there I had 450 hours. At Hunter, I was a research assistant in a water remediation lab, and although it was an animal related research, there's schools nowadays, there's a principle called the One Health initiative that's sort of really gaining ground. And that's the idea that human medicine, veterinary medicine, and environmental health are all interconnected and intertwined. So as long as if research is something that you're interested in and you want that on your application and you're unable to get into a lab that directly works in it, or even human health, as long as you're able to tie it back into that everything is interconnected. I think the slogan is One Health, a good thing to look into. And then here I just have some questions that were sent to me, but I didn't want to have a bunch of text on the screen for you guys to read. So I'll just go through each of the questions and answer them. So the first question here was, how's the workload compared to college? So I think in college, I'm not sure how many credits I took a semester, but it was probably around 18, 17 to 18. So in vet school, for a semester's worth of time, you're taking about 35 credits. And so you are in class every day from 9 to 5, pretty much like a full-time job. I don't know how other schools work, but at Penn, how it works is you're in lecture in the morning for sure. Absolutely, you will be in lecture from 9 to 12. Then at 12 to 1, you get a lunch break, but people study during that time. And then afterwards, we have one or two more classes, and then a bunch of hours in the anatomy lab where you're working on a cadaver or you are being sent to do some clinical skills or shadowing in the clinic. But there are about per exam, I want to say we average about 22 to 25 lectures on every exam. And we're on a block system, so we study one body system at a time. And so every block is sort of scheduled a little differently than the others. And the grading system is different for everyone, but I want to say pretty consistently, we have an exam every 2 weeks. And if there isn't an exam that week, we likely have a quiz, but there are some weeks where you won't have any examinations at all, which is nice. But I do have to study. I go to school from 9 to 5, and then I get home, I shower, I make dinner, and then from 7 to 11 or 11:30, or sometimes I push it to 12 if I have a lot to study, then I'm working on flashcards, making them, or just rewatching a lecture if I didn't understand it, which was hard to get used to in the beginning, but now it's just sort of my lifestyle. I don't dorm. I have my own apartment. I rent a studio because if I chose to dorm, I would be dorming with the undergraduate students, and you would be sort of restricted to the same things where when you're an undergraduate student and you rent and you're like dorming, there's no kitchen that's easily accessible, and you would need something like a dining hall pass. And I didn't want to have to factor all those things. And I also know like I want to be able to make my own meals and meal prep. Like meal prepping became such an important aspect of my life once I started vet school. And so it just made the most sense for me to have my own space. And I really like having my bathroom connected to my own space and that it's my own bathroom. So that was really important for me to not dorm. To pay for vet school, I did say earlier I have a bit of a scholarship from UPenn. It's not enough to cover my entire tuition, but it's a good enough chunk of it to relieve some of the stress. The rest of it, I am borrowing from federal loans. And then sometimes, if I'm lucky, they randomly have grants that become open to students. So for those, I can apply for those and have that to put towards my tuition. How do I pay for other expenses like food? Again, it's on my loans, but also my family will help me out sometimes because it gets really hard to when you like make a budget for how much you plan to spend, you don't plan for things that randomly happen to you. And so I randomly dropped my Apple Pencil and it broke the tip, but in vet school, you really do need your Apple Pencil to mark diagrams or to take pictures of your cadaver and label what you saw there. And you just have all of these miscellaneous costs that fall into your lap. So I had to go replace my pencil for $130. And so sometimes if I do am running closer to my budget than I would have wanted, then my family will help me out. How I study for vet school is definitely a lot different than how I studied in college. In college, I did study a lot when I got more serious about my studies in the last 2 years. When we got back from COVID, in the beginning, I was online and I really could not figure out for the life of me how to study when I was at home with my bed 3 feet away from me. So I want to say in college, I would study like 3 to 4 hours in the days leading up to an exam, but there were days where I could, after school, hang out with my friends and not have to worry about studying. But now in vet school, if I were to hang out with my friends, I would fall too behind. I definitely do have time to hang out with them after exams end, but in the days leading up to an exam, there's no time for me to be fooling around, I want to say. Um, how do I manage my time in vet school? I, again, like Monday through Friday, I'm studying, but Friday nights, I cap my studying at an earlier time. I cap my studying around 8 o'clock, and I take Friday nights to myself as well as early Saturday. So from Saturday until like 3 p.m., I won't study. So I have that gap every week where where I either come home to spend time with my boyfriend or he comes to visit me. And then when starting from like 3 o'clock on Saturday through Sunday, I'm studying again. But Sunday morning, I will meal prep so that I can save time throughout the week. I find that I have some classmates who did not learn to cook before about school, and it really does take a toll on you when you have so much studying and so much, your brain is always on. And if you're not eating a nutritious meal and you have to eat from like the frozen food aisle all the time, it definitely like people tell me that they wish they knew how to cook better so that they could fuel their mind better. So, and then I do laundry. I do laundry on Fridays. I forgot to mention that. When I cap off my time, I have to do laundry on Fridays. How did I go about recommendation letters? So for the Vimcast, I think, well, Julia's already applied, so she would do this, but they have, you can submit up to 6 recommendation letters. I had 5 recommendation letters total. 2 were from veterinarians, 2 were from professors, and 1 was from my research PI. And so to go about asking for recommendation letters, I um I found a time where I felt it was appropriate to I asked them all in person. That's the first thing, you have to ask them all in person if you can. So for the veterinarians, I waited until it wasn't such a busy time at work and I told them like this is the place that made me want to really become a veterinarian. And I told them for the people that this applied to that as a veterinarian, I want to practice the medicine to the same quality that they are performing it, and that they have sort of served as a mentor to me at that until that point. And so would really, if they felt personally that they could write a strong recommendation letter, that I would want one of that I would want one from them. So I think that's really important when you're asking to just be honest about it and ask them, do you think you can write a strong letter of recommendation? Because when you ask in person, I think that people might feel obligated to say yes, even if they're not sure if they could write you a really good quality recommendation letter. And so I think that by asking them that, do they can write a strong letter, and they say like it gives them a way to say, no, I don't think I'll be able to, or yes, I will be able to. And so that makes that conversation a little easier when you phrase it like that. My laptop just completely bugged out for a second. Um, and then for the professors that I did ask, I asked, I think, my biochemistry professor, Dr. Ashtroff, and there was definitely someone else, but I'm blanking right now. And for those, I went to office hours and told them what I really wanted, and that I definitely got lucky, I want to say, because for biochemistry, in your first biochemistry, they have a course. It's 1 hour, I think, a week. It's like recitation, but it's with the actual professor who teaches the class. And so I built my relationship with Dr. Ashroff in recitation hours. So it didn't really take a lot of my time to go out of my way to email him or speak with him after class. So that's why it was easier for me to ask him, because he had already known me in a class that for recitation you have to ask questions. So that was easier. And then my PI, I asked him for the letter of recommendation actually only 2 weeks into me meeting him, because I was already about to hit submit on my applications when I started in his lab, and I had about 2 weeks to spare that I could wait before hitting submit. So I waited those 2 weeks and I asked him at that point if he felt that he knew me enough in the hours that we were working together to again write me a strong letter of recommendation. And he said he felt that he would be able to, and that he could get that to me rather quickly. And so that was how that went. Recommendations for volunteering. I, if you can, I know you need to have volunteer hours, but if you can, really try to do something that's paid, because working as a veterinary assistant, you can actually make a decent amount of money. And applications are not very cheap. I remember they were quite expensive and there were supplemental fees. Some schools even had you take the CASPER exam, which is again more money. And so I do recommend if you can to really just do some volunteer hours, but if you can, try to get a paid opportunity. And I really recommend working in a place that's a specialty hospital, like the one that I worked at, Veterinary Emergency and Referral Group. I really enjoyed my time there. I started out working on just the emergency floor, and from there, I worked in internal medicine, I worked in oncology, I did shifts in, I think, dermatology, and ultimately I ended up working more in the ICU. But because it's a specialty hospital, you can really see how something starts from being an emergency and then being directed to the actual specialty that it needs. And when you're in that sort of setting, you have so many more doctors who are board certified in their specialty. And to have a, if you say in your application that you want to do a specific specialty, it's quite important to have a doctor in that specialty write your recommendation as well. So I just found that that was the ideal environment for me personally. And volunteering, you want to show them that you can do a little bit of everything. I think that a lot of people believe that they need to have a super, super diverse range of experiences, which is true, but there is also another approach that you can take where you focus a lot of your time into one field and you do sprinkles of other ones to show that you can do everything, but you have a solidified interest. And so that second approach is what I took. I did Again, I did the bulk of my hours, about 1,200 hours in the emergency department, and I had a sprinkle of volunteering, um, like horsework and vaccine clinics, which just falls under the branch of like shelter medicine. And so you can definitely see that approach as well, which is what I did. Gallup, New York City was great. Their application process was super easy, and the work is also not too hard. It's in the sense where if you've never worked with horses before, it's not too scary to make that jump. It's just a little bit of a hill to learn to work with them. So I did like that, and they love volunteers from Hunter. I think we've sent them quite a few volunteers throughout the years. Um, and then yeah, I think that's all I have. I think there were some questions about the GRE. I did not take the GRE because by the time that I was applying, I think only about 6 schools really required it. So I just chose not to apply to those schools because the schools that I would have really wanted to attend did not require it. I did not take a gap year. I went straight on to veterinary school after I graduated. I graduated in May and I started veterinary school in August. I know that a lot of people say that it's important to take a gap year to, I guess, experience life. If you need to take a gap year for the to gain more experience, like that's always really good. But I find that for me personally, if I lose momentum, if I stop doing something and I lose momentum, it might actually cost me too much to do that gap year in the long run. Like I might have lost some motivation. So I decided to go straight into veterinary school, but I took a more relaxed summer. I worked here and there, but I spent most of the time just relaxing in preparation for school, and I found that that worked really well for me, but that might vary like case to case. And I think that's all I have. If anyone has like questions, I'm happy to answer them. Or if there's anything I covered that was confusing, I'm happy to take questions about that as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, just a question for me. How did you get
Yeah.
to do so many hours in the vet group?
So basically I worked, okay, so this was a really big problem for me at first. I could not find a place that was willing to work with my school schedule until Veterinary Emergency Referral Group. Like I'll keep plugging in their name. They were such a great place to me personally. I learned so much there. But I went to Veterinary Emergency Group for an interview and I told them very blatantly, I told them I'm a full-time student and in order to get the grades that I need to get into veterinary school, I need to focus on my schoolwork, but I also need to have hours in order to be able to get there. And it was really important that if I was going to work a job, I told them I would commit, like at when I was there, I would be fully present and I will work as hard as I possibly can. But in the days, like all the other days of the week, I need to be focused on schoolwork. And so what I worked out that really worked for me, it was hard though, is that I worked 10 hours every Sunday. So on Sundays, I would work from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I would be really tired when I got home, but I still would do a little bit of studying for the next day. But by by just setting that one day aside for my veterinary experience, it made me focus on my studies all the other days of the week. And as long as I did that, I would study, I guess, more Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and some Saturday. But I would work harder on my schoolwork those days and set aside just Sunday for gaining veterinary experience. And that worked really well for me. And if I did have an exam on Monday, then I will like study when I come home from work, which is really tiring, but I did do that. Um, Animal Haven is only a 2 hour shift. And so if I had a really big block between my classes, because I found that sometimes I would have like 4 hours between my classes, I would just go to the animal shelter, and work 2 hours and go back to school. And it was also sort of a nice little break from studying. I can just like work with animals and be reminded about why I was in school to be doing that. So I did do that. My summers, I would work. And when you're working in an emergency clinic, these hours are 10 hours or 12 hours. So and also they cap you, like you're not allowed to really work past like 40 hours in a week. It's a lot of companies don't allow that. And also it's too much of a toll on you. So if you think that you're going to do like 30 hours or 40 hours a week, in the summers, you're pretty much working 4 days and you have 3 days off, which is more than enough to recuperate. And they might even let you like space it out. You can work Monday, you can be off Tuesday, you can work Wednesday, be off Thursday, and you can space it out like that. And so it was really easy for me to rack up those hours when I was working in the summer. Um, and then my role at I worked at veterinary emergency and referral group. There's a veterinary emergency group, but that's a separate one. I worked at VERG. And so I was a veterinary assistant, but more in a bigger capacity than I would have been at a private practice. I was I would, let's say that an emergency came in, I would be in charge of like oxygen, helping, I would hold the animal's mouth and like pull their tongue forward so that the doctor can intubate. I will squeeze the breathing bag so that the animal could be breathing while people are resuscitating. Or I'll prepare, sometimes I'll draw up drugs. You prepare flushes, which is like what you push into a line to make sure like the medication goes in all the way when you're putting in a catheter. I would run. I did a chemistry major, so I really liked this part of it. I would run cross matches, which is when you do an experiment to figure out if the blood bag is going to match your patient's blood type. So I did a lot of that, and it would be like on an emergency basis. So like I have like 10 minutes to figure out what blood bag can be given to a patient. And so that was what I did. I would work with that. Ran blood tests like CBCs, like liver profiles, um, something called epochs, but it was all very informative because you get to like really see all aspects of veterinary medicine. I would also hold for x-rays, either in the x-ray room or I'll take an x-ray outside. I'll shoot the x-ray for them. I'll hold for ultrasounds and a bunch of procedures. I've like scopes, endoscopies, enemas. I think I did an enema once. But there is also a lot of cleaning. Like with every veterinary job, there's a lot of cleaning involved. So I did do a lot of that. And another thing that I really liked about the place that I worked, Berg, is that while I did have to walk the animals, because I think in New York in general, it's just a really busy place. And so I've had jobs where I would have to walk the animals outside, but at Berg, they had the roof dedicated, like they made it a green space and it was all fenced so that you would just take the animal upstairs and have them walk on the roof. And then at the end, you just spray it down to clean it. And it was like they made it like a faux grassland for them. So I really like that. So I didn't have to leave the building or worry about like an animal running off leash. Because even if that's very unlikely to happen, in my mind personally, I'm like, oh no, what if this animal runs loose while I'm walking them? So I really like that. Um, but I mainly worked in the emergency service at first, but then the intensive care unit doctor asked for me to be pulled and put into her department. And so that's why I ended up being just in the ICU and I worked with just critical care for, I think after that, after the 1,000 like 200 hours that I did where I was mainly emergency service, I was fully critical care for about like another 1,000 hours before I started at school. Oh, and then there's a question about repeating what I did about research work. I did environmental research, and I know that in the beginning when I was trying to do research, I already had advisors telling me that I really needed to find a lab where they work with dolphins. I know there's a dolphin lab that goes to Belize. There's like mouse labs or like a bird lab. They kept trying to tell me to join those labs, but I couldn't get into them. They were either already full or I just, yeah, I think they were already full. And so I joined an environmental lab, and because there's the One Health initiative is getting really big, where they believe that animal health, human health, and environmental health are connected. And environmental health is becoming like an increasingly important issue. Like I found that when I was interviewing, my interviewers really liked that my research was on the environment, and I was able to connect it back. So what I was saying about that is that if you want research on your application, like not every school will need to see that. You don't need to have research at all. Some schools just like to see that you have research. And if those are the schools you are applying to and you cannot get into an animal lab, then I think the next best option is to do an environmental lab. I do have time for some hobbies. I want to say that they're not great hobbies. I like to shop, like window shop after an exam. That's sort of my tradition after an exam. If because after every exam, you have the weekend completely free. So I will like on Friday, I will go window shop and then I'll come home to New York and I spend time with my boyfriend for a day. And then the next day I go back and I clean up my apartment and stuff like that. I like to also school will also have a bunch of like opportunities for you to like get hobbies done. There's a bunch of arts and crafts things in school where you can go and just do that. So at lunchtime, you know how you have that hour? There are some of my classmates who will go and make a stuffed animal for break. And they'll teach you, they'll have all the sewing supplies for you if that's something that you're interested in. There's also I like to binge watch movies and like TV shows, and I will do that. I could do that like every night if I wanted to. I watch, let's say, I want to say I watch about like 30 minutes of TV like every night before I go to sleep because I need something to turn my brain off after it's been working the entire day. I don't have great hobbies, but I have like many things that I do here and there to keep myself sane. And so every night I'll watch a little bit of like TV or like TikToks. I like to go shopping, window shopping because I'm on loans. But I think that I would say I don't feel miserable in school. I definitely have time to come home to see family if I need to, hang out with my friends if I wanted to. You just have to be really smart about when you're doing those things. You have time to do it, just it's just a question of when you can do it. I did not e-permit any of my courses at Hunter, but I don't think that it's something that interviewers will really question. As long as it's not, as long as you don't make a habit out of e-permitting it, because then they'd question like why you're doing it so often. But I had friends who did take a course that was completely online simply because they already graduated from their major at Hunter, and it was a course that they could take online over the summer through an online portal. Not every school will want you to do that, but there are schools who do not mind at all. Like Ohio State University, I know will not care if you want to take like organic chemistry 2 online or something, or like biochemistry online. Or I think I had a friend who also even took physics 2 online if because there are some schools who will want to see like really advanced courses and like everything. And I had a friend who did it through, I think it's like the New England University portal online, and she took biochemistry on there, and she was not even questioned at all. Like, and she goes to Ohio State Vet School now. Yeah, of course. Does anyone have any more questions? It can be about anything. If you have questions about like prerequisites or applying or like choosing schools, you can ask me anything.
I have one question. What was like one of your first job or volunteering opportunities that you took on?
The first one that I ever took on was I was interning at Brooklyn Heights Veterinary Hospital, and that was a private practice. So if you're just starting out, I think private practice is a good start because it's a lot calmer and it's a big step to get into like a new field for the first time, obviously. And I think that it was good for a little bit. I did private practice for I think like 4 months. And in that time, I learned about like the more routine visits an animal could have. I learned about like flea and tick prevention, heartworm prevention, and how to talk to clients about these things. So I think that it was a good experience. And I do know that Brooklyn Heights is still very like open to like having people volunteer. So if that's like a name you guys want to take down, and the doctor there was super nice, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Heather Thompson, she's super nice. And one of her, this is like super not even related that much, but one of her technicians had left to go to vet school and now works as a vet there. So she like really cares about fostering relationships that last. So that's why I really do recommend Brooklyn Heights Veterinary Hospital if that's if like primary care sort of is what you want to get started in, and I do recommend that. And you learn about like their primary care does more of like the spaying and neutering, so you can learn more about those and watch those procedures without worrying about like a patient that's like next door. Like you actually have time to shadow and watch these operations. So I do think that primary care is a good place to start. But if you then decide that you want to specialize further in your career, then I think it's important to be in a more like hospital setting. How did I organize my notes and study in undergrad? Um, I was not the best organized, but I want to say that it was really helpful for me to. I'm not very good at writing notes while professors are talking. I'm not very fast at writing. So a lot of professors, I think, will upload their PowerPoints for you. So I like to, in the speaker notes section, write what they're saying in class or like notes about what they're saying. So when I go back to study and I'm going through the slides, I know exactly what they said about that slide. Because what professors like to do is they like to ask you questions about things they said in class, but it's not necessarily on the PowerPoint itself. So I found that was really helpful to just take notes directly on the PowerPoint itself in the speaker section. And I would, I think my study habits were a little different for every class. So if I took like a language class, I would do flashcards for those. Like I think every class has things that are easier to learn if you can just click it and have it like flashed on the screen multiple times in your face. So I really like doing flashcards. I am really proud of this. I'm considered a top creator on Quizlet. I am a really big fan of doing that. But my biggest study trick was literally just directly type your notes onto the PowerPoint. I applied with a 3.72 GPA, but they'll ask you about this in your interview or like in those supplemental applications that they send to you in the middle of the cycle, and they'll ask you like, what is your GPA now? And so in that, I think I reported my GPA to be 3.74, which is not a drastic change. Um, I didn't do so well in biology 102. I did get a C in that class, and that was a really big thing that kind of hindered my GPA from getting really high, like higher than a 3.7, 3.8. But in the VimCast, which I'm sure you've already done, there is an explanation section. So I just put it down there that I don't think that my grades in this class were a reflection of my abilities as a student because I simply did not had not figured out at that time what was the best way for me to study for that class. But my experience in that class like taught me more for my future classes. And so, and I'm finding that uh I think that a 3.7, 3.8 is pretty competitive. A lot of my classmates were around there anyway. And I know it's discouraging also if you have like B's and C's, but I find that amongst my classmates, and this is like at Penn, so I think it's like it speaks enough that like a well-known university will not mind too much if you have like one or two bad grades, as long as you explain it well. Is that all? Did I take neuroscience at Hunter? No, I did not. I did take brain and behavior as a course, but I don't think that's the specific course they were talking about. I took brain and behavior as part of my psychology minor, but I don't think I took yeah, I did take that, but not specifically a neuroscience like titled course. And I don't think that's a requirement for a lot of vet schools, us, unless they've changed things since I've applied. But no, no one asked me about that course in any of my interviews at all. I know, like, Julie, are you there? I know you're applying right now. Like, if you have any questions about like how to prepare for interviews, like I am all ears for that too.
Yeah, I haven't really reached like the interview process yet because I didn't submit yet. But
Yeah,
what were some things that you recommend someone would do to prepare for like all the interviews that you did?
yeah. So I ended up interviewing, I think, I did 4 or 5 interviews. And for those, I just really recommend knowing your application, like exactly what you wrote on your application, because some schools do blind interviews where they like have an interviewer meet you and they've never seen your file before, but some will have your file in front of them and they will pull out something you said and ask you about it. So I would just know your application like the back of your hand. Also, I don't know if you know this horrible site, Student Doctor Network. It's horrible because it will have a thread for your exact school and people will say like when they got offered an interview, what day it was like they're offered an interview. But there's also a post-interview survey thing for every school on that site, and they'll tell you exactly what questions were asked in their interview for their portion. And so I looked at that and I had a rough idea of what questions that school liked to ask. And so, like for example, for Penn, there were some questions that were on that site that they consistently ask every single student. And so I prepared using that. And then that was really helpful. And then also I recommend, I know like of course do a mock interview, but don't do too many. Like don't practice your answers too much. When you're like preparing with those questions that I'm telling you about on Student Doctor, type out bullet points of points you would want to hit, but do not write out an answer fully because you don't want to sound too rehearsed in your interviews. You want to have a rough idea of what you're going to say, but just on a bullet point level so that you can still sound genuine in your interview as if you're like making the thoughts right then and there, even if that's not the case. But what I'm saying is don't over rehearse, but do a little bit of prep, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had no idea about that like website that it existed. I'm definitely gonna look into that.
Yeah,
I had one more question
yeah.
also for the Casper exam. How did you prepare for the Casper exam? Because I know it's kind of like a problem solving type of exam, but I just want to know how you prepared for that as well.
I want to say so when you sign up for the Casper, I don't know if you have yet. I think that I took mine in like August, so I don't think you have to take it anytime soon. But when you sign up for the site, they have two full-length practice exams that you can take, and it'll be exactly like the one that you're going to take. Well, like the questions will be different, but it'll literally make you wait the exact same time, and it'll be the same format as your exam. So I took both of those, and then I noticed like a pattern the with the questions. So it's kind of like problem solving, but mostly it's like it's to see if you can consider everybody's point of view and then come to your own decision. So what you have to do is that in every single question, you have to think who are the people who are like the stakeholders here, and you think, okay, like if I make this decision, how does it affect this person? And what they want to see is that you're actively thinking about that like the entire time. So there are questions that you have to type, but there are questions where you're going to be on camera and filmed, and the ones that where you're like, and every single question gets sent to a different reviewer across the United States so that it's fair that not one person is being completely subjective about your responses. But they want to see you on camera thinking, if I make this decision, how will this person be affected? If I make this decision, how will it affect this person? And then you come to a decision, and then the next question will probably like question your first decision, and they want you to stick to the choice that you made in the beginning, unless it was like an absolute curveball where if you choose what you originally chose, it'll hurt like too many people. Usually they want to see that you can stand your ground even when they're throwing new scenarios at you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I haven't enrolled for it just yet, but I think
Yeah,
I'm gonna probably get around in the summer because like that's right after where the application is due. But thank you so
yeah,
much.
yeah, of course. And also there's like scenarios online that I think BMO has some, and they have the sample question, and they show you like how somebody who scored full points would have answered that question. So when my boyfriend's also like pre-health, but he's pre-med, but he also has to take the Casper. So what he did when he was practicing for his exam was that he would do those prompts and then put it as a side-by-side comparison. Like he'll do it, not look at the answer, and then side-by-side compare what he could have done better. And so I wouldn't over prepare for that also. Like it's really not an exam that you can prepare for as long as you understand the format of it, then and you understand that you need to consider everybody and you can't just jump to like conclusions. You have to like you also have to express like if I had this piece of information, this would change my decision this much. And it's really just thinking, how can you make the best decision for everybody involved? um I would say like I know they recommend you prep like I think they say something like 3 months or something, right? Like they recommend you prepare for 3 months. I do not recommend that. I think 3 weeks of preparation is good enough for that. And no, not all vet schools require this exam. Long Island University did require it. I'm not sure if they took that away. I think Virginia, Maryland might require it. I want to say maybe like a handful of them require this exam, but for me personally, I also didn't feel that like the stakes were too high because I applied to 8 schools. Only one of them required the Casper, but I did end up scoring well on this exam. And I also have some resources that I don't know if you guys have. I gave it to Nina when I was graduating, but there's a document that I have of the pros and cons of every school that, and this is like a living, breathing document, sort of like the Constitution, where that students who are at the school currently will edit on this document to make sure that it's up to date about like the pros and cons of attending the school. And you'll have like information that's not readily available on the internet. And as well as there's a giant master sheet of the school's names are on the left hand side, and all the prerequisites and exams are listed on the like top corner. And if the school requires it, there'll be like a dot in that area. So what I did was I like took that, made an Excel sheet, filled in my prerequisites, and figured out which schools I could actually apply to based on this chart. And this chart is like very accurate. Like I've double checked it multiple times across the schools that I applied to, and it had all the prerequisites that this chart said I needed. It was actually required by the school.
Oh, maybe you can send it to me to my email and I can share it with all of them with the recording of the
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, and I also have a PowerPoint that I made for the Dissecting the VimCast application when I was a student that I can also forward that you guys can share for when people are applying. And it has like samples of how I answered like the explanation statement about low grades, or as well as it has information about how I filled out descriptions about my experiences and sample interview questions or supplemental questions that are available, which change year to year, but they're pretty much like the same idea. So I will send that to you as well.
Okay, yeah, that would
Yeah,
be
that was
great.
actually sorry, Maria. That was gonna be my next question on I'm like up to the experience part now, and I know I heard a lot of controversy on if people should like bullet their experiences or if they should like write out full sentences, but I think your PowerPoint should probably hit that.
Yeah, a lot. Some people do bullet points, but I find that writing out your experiences is I think it's better. As long because the thing with bullet points is that people want you to like not overwhelm them with too many words. As long as you keep it concise in your paragraph, I prefer the paragraph method. Um, because it to me it just feels a little more professional and that you took the application a little more like even more seriously. Even if you do bullet points and you took it seriously, it might not come off that way. Like people can be very sensitive when they're reviewing applications, and you never know when they might take something like completely out of context and run with it. So that's why I prefer like just doing the full sentences in a small paragraph. Nothing crazy. Um, I know that like pre-health office has a lot more experience with the med school applications, and the med school applications go are completely different where they have to like say what each experience taught them. But that's not the case in the veterinary like application. You want to say exactly what hard skills you gained and what like soft skills you gained, but not explicitly saying that those are your hard skills and soft skills. But my PowerPoint will have that like covered. Okay. I'm not sure what time we have this scheduled until, but I if it was scheduled till 3, then we are right around that time. And but I'm happy to take more questions. And I've left my email in the chat. And you guys can email me with any questions at any point. I'm always on my email. I did not have a pre-health file, actually. I had a bit of a unique situation where Bobby and I could not get Bobby to open my file for some reason. I did all the workshops and they did not they couldn't confirm that I went to one of them, and I went to it again. And then I came back and I told him, "Hey, I went to this workshop now. Can you open my file?" And at that point, he said that he calculated my GPA to be too low, which couldn't have been possible. And so I went to Nina And I told Nina, I'm unable to get Bobby to open my file, but I plan to apply now and I want your support. And so Nina helped me through, like, we did a one mock interview together. She helped me with my personal statement and all my supplemental essays, but I did not apply using a pre-health file, if that's the question. I had asked all my recommenders to directly input their recommendation into the VMCAS site on their own manually, like not through a portal system, which I know is like what the pre-health file allows you to do, which is like have everything in one place, which would have been more organized. But I find that if you prepared enough on like your own, you've organized enough. I didn't find that in my personal experience that it hindered my application by not using a pre-al file, but I had the help of Nina, and that was instrumental in me getting into vet school. So I would say if you can have like pre-health help you with like your essays and like preparing for an interview, then yes, but I didn't necessarily need a file on my end. Is that all?
No, I think if no one else has any more questions, we can end the meeting here.
Okay. All right. And my email's in the chat. I'll like leave it again. But you guys can contact me with any questions. If you have any questions about application or like UPenn in general, that's my email. That's my personal email. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
But thank you, Jasmine. This was very helpful and very informative.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.